Which anime from the spring 2021 season can make a good impression in just 5 minutes? That's the question I asked last week, and the one I'll apply to another 15 shows from the season today. All shows are new anime, not continuations, opening songs don't count as part of the 5 minutes, and I'm going into all shows blind without reading summaries. Now without further ado, let's get into the shows. First up is Gokushufudou, or Way of the Househusband. The obvious thing to talk about here first is the animation or lack thereof. Since it's a JC staff show, that's not too surprising, but I'll give this one a pass because apparently it was marketed as a motion comic rather than an anime in Japan. If you think of it as just a manga with bonus voice acting and sound effects, it's less of a disappointment. Plus, the plot is very engaging from the start. There's a guy who's a former Yakuza member who's now a stay-at-home husband, and the show constantly uses that dynamic to subvert expectations, like him opening the door splattered in red holding a short sword, and then using it to prepare a delicious meal. It's quite fun so far. The second show is Super Cub. I love everything about this show so far, and I get the feeling that it could be a sleeper hit. The first 5 minutes immerses the viewer into the world, with stunning visuals that made me feel like I was watching a movie. It's done by Studio Kai, which is relatively new to the scene and hasn't made many shows yet. There's almost no dialogue in the show's opening, so we slowly get to know the town and then the show's lead just by observation. From the girl's expressions, we can tell she's lonely even before the slight bit of narration says she has no parents, and it's clear that being on her bike is one of the few things that make her happy. But her struggle to get up the hill to her school represents the uphill struggle she also faces in her social life. The sound design in this show is also incredible. One of the reasons why the lack of dialogue at the start is so effective is because every little detail of the environment is displayed perfectly through sound. This is something I will absolutely watch more of. Next is Seijo no Maryoku wa Bannou desu, or The Saint's magic power is omnipotent. The show starts off with some pretty outdoor shots and an ominous creature forming. Then it cuts to an office lady, revealing that it's yet another isekai show. There are plenty of isekai I like, but this one seems pretty generic so far, with the woman being summoned by mages to fight evil creatures. There's a lot of boring exposition through dialogue about the land that's only slightly better than narration, too. The only interesting things so far are that there are 2 people summoned, and the main lead wants to leave. Now let's talk about Shakunetsu Kabaddi, or Burning Kabaddi. I'm not really into sports anime, so I was prepared for this one to not interest me, but I was pleasantly surprised. We only got a brief glimpse at the start of the sport itself, which seems unique in that there's no equipment. But the most intriguing thing is the main character, who hates sports. He used to be a star soccer player, but the experience gave him an aversion to all sports, and now he just wants to be a live streamer instead. Sports clubs fail to recruit him until a persistent underclassman gets him to come to a kabaddi practice. This unusual choice of main character, plus the strong voice acting from Yuma Uchida, who plays Megumi in Jujutsu Kaisen, has me interested. The 5th show on the list is Subarashiki no Sekai the animation, or The World Ends With You the animation. This is based on a video game, though I haven't played it. And like most anime based on a video game, it's not great so far. I found the very first part interesting, as the main character appears to be in a different plane than other people in the world, as they neither notice him nor can interact with him physically. He can also read their thoughts. But then that strange atmosphere is immediately broken by a bunch of CG frog monsters appearing and a mediocre fight scene where they turn into little black squares when destroyed. There's nothing particularly impressive about the visuals or acting. I don't think I'll watch this anime, but I might check out the game. Next up is Odd Taxi. To be honest, I'm not really a fan of the everyone's an animal aesthetic that's been popping up in more and more shows recently. However, I didn't mind it in this one. It seems like this show may have darker themes, as it opens with a walrus taxi driver dreaming of being thrown in the river wrapped in concrete blocks. There are also shots throughout of an animal with a gun and 2 drunk ones leaving a bar, and there's a news story on the radio about a missing girl. The dialogue between the taxi driver and his first passenger is also very blunt and introspective, the opposite of the friendly but empty exchange you'd normally expect. Overall, I think the show has built a really intriguing atmosphere so far, and it's got some enjoyable music too. Let's move on to Bakuten, or Backflip. This is another sports anime, and it focuses on a baseball player who's always on the bench and seems pretty aloof as a result. Then he sees a bunch of guys doing handstands outside and later stumbles upon their rhythmic gymnastics performance and gets captivated by it. Overall, I think the first 5 minutes is pretty decent. The visuals are nice and the characters have pretty distinctive designs with a wide variety of hair colors and styles. The gymnastics performance CG is a little bit stiff, but looks better than a lot of shows' CG. That said, this show didn't have anything that really drew me in immediately. Next is Bishounen Tanteidan, or Pretty Boy Detective Club. This show has a distinctive art style that I knew had to be from Shaft even before I confirmed it on my anime list. It looks gorgeous and has a pretty strong soundtrack to match. The otherworldly visuals in the setting are matched by the strange, overly dramatic speech of the characters. The way they talk to each other is unnatural, but stylistically it works, similar to a Wes Anderson movie. There's a lot packed into the first 5 minutes, from talk about philosophy and giving up on dreams to the introduction of the secretive Pretty Boy Detective Club. It's just so bizarre that I'd like to see more. Now it's time for Godzilla SP, or Godzilla Singular Point. This show is by Bones and Orange, so its art is very refined, and there's a ton of detail in every shot. That said, if you showed me the first 5 minutes of this without telling me the title and said it was about Godzilla, I'd be very surprised. So far, the plot is taking an occult angle, with people who appear to be paranormal investigators taking a look at an old mansion and finding a secret room with a radio playing a song in the basement. Honestly, nothing really interesting has happened so far, but I may watch more eventually just to see when Godzilla comes in. I do want to acknowledge that the lead voice actor, Shoya Ishige, is giving a very solid performance despite not having many prior roles. The next show is Sayonara, Watashi no Cramer, or Goodbye Cramer. This is a women's soccer anime, and since sports anime really need to stand out to get me to watch, this one missed the mark. The beginning, I guess, was supposed to be inspirational, but a girl who wants to join boys soccer is basically told, "Nah, there's too big of a physical difference, but you're way better than the other girls so you can bring them up." I feel like a story about the only girl in boys soccer proving people wrong would be more interesting. Anyway, the first 5 minutes is basically just an exposition dump and not particularly engaging, though I do like the character designs, as the original manga is by the creator of Your Lie in April. Let's move on to Dragon Ie Okao, or Dragon's House Hunting. This show's opening is pretty boring. There's a bunch of narration about the different types of creatures in the world that seems unnecessary. Then, even after the opening song, it picks up with narration again. It just seems like filling time, and if that's how you have to start your show, it's not a good sign. There is some fun stuff in the last bit of the 5 minutes, with slimes buying a cave from a real estate agent and an awkward dragon being disowned. The show could have led with those and made a far better impression. Now let's talk about Yakunara Mug Cup Mo, or Let's Make a Mug 2. I'm of the mind that anime can make a story about anything interesting, but I'm not really sure if I'm ready to watch an anime about pottery. There's nothing particularly bad about this so far, but there's really nothing that catches my eye either. It seems like it'll be a pretty wholesome slice-of-life anime. The character designs are pretty distinctive, and all of the girls seem to have a different personality. One is bubbly, one is reserved, and one is in between. Another thing to note is that the episodes are less than 15 minutes each, so it could be a good show if you don't have a lot of time. The next show is 7 Knights Revolution Eiyu no Keishosha, or 7 Knights Revolution The Hero's Successor. There's not much to talk about here. It's another anime with bad CG monsters attacking people. It opens with a cliché scene of finding a doll in the ruins of a destroyed village, and everything else is pretty generic as well. The attack scenes are not especially exciting, and the character designs didn't catch my eye much. The second to last show is Blue Reflection Ray. This has a decent amount of animation for a JC Staff anime, and I like the general aesthetic of the characters, with the way certain areas of their faces and arms are shaded. Other than that, the first 5 minutes is pretty flat. There's a CG creature and a bunch of girls that are fighting it but then give up for some reason. Then it goes to what I think is probably a flashback with a girl enrolling in a school. Since there are quite a few good shows airing this season, the bar is pretty high and this one didn't make it. Finally, there's Cestus the Roman Fighter. This is the obligatory all-CG anime of the season. Honestly, it doesn't look nearly as bad as something like X-Arm, but there's still something off about it. This show is about slaves boxing in the Roman Empire, and from what I know about Rome, it doesn't seem to be especially concerned with historical accuracy. The characters don't really stand out either. If I ever get the desire to watch a boxing anime this season, I'll watch Megalobox instead. Between last week and this week, that's most of the new shows for the spring 2021 season. There are a few others I won't get a chance to go over though, that you might want to explore on your own. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing for weekly content. I'm Matrix from Matrix AM, Anime, and more, and I hope you have a great day.